This is Judy Ann Scheidler, and I'd like to welcome you back to At Home in Bethel Park. Today, we have with us Brian Baker from Baker's Waterproofing. I am fairly certain that most of you have heard their commercials on the radio or seen them on the TV, but we decided we wanted to find out exactly what Baker's Waterproofing or other waterproofing companies can do for us. Hi, Brian.
Hi there, Judy. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you for coming.
Sure.
Why don't you give us a little bit of information on yourself?
Well, as far as myself, I started in this industry as basically 11, 12-year-old boy working with my father, who was the owner of the company. And I always worked with installations, so having supervisor of Dad with you all the time, teaching you the right way to do things, and very often how I'm not doing things, and had basically worked with him all through high school and in the summers in college and everything else. And then when I graduated college, kind of did a different aspect with the company in which I'd go out and design systems and explain, what I'm seeing, recommendations, all those sort of things. And then I, at one point, was the sales manager for the company to help train new service advisors in what they should be looking for and the best ways to solve all the issues and basement problems we run into. And now the last couple of years, took over operations of the company, and I'm the owner of the company. So I've seen it from ground up, so that's for sure.
Well, that's the best way for a family member to take over a business, ground up. I don't think you should get it for free.
Yeah, there isn't a job that I haven't performed.
Well, that's good, because then you know what problems you're up against.
Yeah.
What'd you go to college for?
I went to school at Pitt, and my major,
Pitt.
my major ended up being psychology, but I had more everything I would need, any type of pre-med type field, so it totally relates with basement waterproofing and foundation repair.
Well, actually, the psychology maybe, because I'm sure you run into a lot of people that are in absolute panic over a wet basement.
Absolutely.
What does it mean, really, when you have a wet basement?
Well, wet basement, it's really up to interpretation, because it's funny, we get the phone call of the person in a panic situation, please come out right away, you're not going to believe us when you see it, and we go out and might see a tiny little trickle running across the floor, and they're in a mad panic. That is a very huge concern of theirs. Then the very next appointment we may go to, you step off the bottom step into the basement and land in water, and the person's like, well, it's not that bad. That only happens when it rains. So everyone's interpretation of a wet basement is totally different.
As a real estate agent, we love the seller disclosures that say, my basement only gets wet during heavy rains.
Yes.
Yes. And we
so
all say,
if it doesn't rain, it's great.
Yeah, that's subjective, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
So, what are the most common causes of a wet basement? Go from the trickle down to the flooding.
What tends to happen is when they're building the home, number one, they'll tend to, you have brand new gutters, you have brand new downspouts that lead all the water away from the foundation. They put footing drains in, which a generic explanation of a footing drain, they put a perforated pipe lower than your basement floor outside. Put a foundation coating on all of your basement walls so that when the ground is wet, the water doesn't have a natural pathway to get right into the basement.
Now that's required on new construction.
Yes.
Or not. Sometimes?
Almost everywhere it would be code to have exterior French drains installed while the home is being built, because it only makes sense.
Right.
It's already all exposed, and really putting foundation coating, and there's all different types of grades, some are better than others, but some sort of coating on the wall. So the idea is the water can't penetrate the wall, works its way to the bottom, and put a perforated pipe, a pipe with holes in it, down by the footing, and cover it with as much stone as possible. So the idea is, water is going to show up there, but the idea is drain through the stone into that pipe, and then drain that pipe away to a storm sewer or to daylight somewhere to get the water away from the house. But as time goes on...
How long has building code required that, do you know?
I'm not even sure, because every area is different, but that's been a common practice for so long. I mean, now my family, we've done over 15,000 homes, and I would say the majority of them that we repair, they have footing drains in them.
Oh, they do?
Yes, it's just as time goes on, you figure dirt gets in them, tree roots, or even one little collapse anywhere in that system all the way around the house, it makes that whole system useless. And that's when you start getting to the point that folks are explaining to us, I've lived here 20 years. For 15 years, I had no issues. 5 years ago, I was getting, the block was getting discolored and damp. Now 3 years ago, at the worst of times, I'd get a little trickle running across the floor. Now, every time it rains, I have water coming in. So it tends to be, it doesn't go from 0 to 60. I mean, it's just as each year progresses, it tends to get a little worse. And then once it gets to a certain point, they're so sick of dealing with it, then that's when we meet them.
Yeah, that coating, just to be clear, that's on the outside of the foundation, that's not the same as the Drylok that you buy and paint on the walls inside.
No, it's not. The most common type of, you'll hear people call it tar, is like some sort of asphalt, whether it's like a rubberized asphalt or even more like a cement type coating. There's all different varieties of that. But the Drylok is more used on the inside, where when you put that over the block, it kind of clogs the pores. So if it's a concrete block wall, there's little pores throughout that block, and the paint is designed to kind of soak into the pores. And it's really trying to keep all the dampness or moisture or water, I guess, dammed up
so
in the wall.
So it's keeping the moisture in the wall, but it's not stopping the water. So you still have that the water pressure against the wall.
Yeah. So it's like the hydrostatic pressure that if the water's built in there, if those paints, Drylok and everything else, those paints would solve all water problems, we would be unnecessary. It's just as water builds up, that hydrostatic pressure builds, and then it'll usually find the weakest point and leak out. And the most common description is the water will come out right where the floor and the wall meet, right at that seam, is where it tends to leak out.
Where the concrete's sitting on the footing down there.
Yeah, where the concrete and floor meet there,
Yeah. So just stepping back for 1 second. Downspouts, ground lines, how often is that the problem? How often is it a simple enough repair for you to go out and redo some ground lines instead of a full mediation?
Yeah, and that's always a very difficult situation to address, because these are all lines that are buried in the ground. So a lot of times what we can do, we can look at the downspout lines and look for problems, where number one, checking out the gutters. Please get your leaves and all the debris, get that out of the gutters. Because when the water... Do you talk
about gutter guards to people too, like the screening to keep that?
We don't do them, but I think they're a good idea for the high quality ones that work to keep the leaves and debris out of the gutters. Because you figure if your gutters are clogged, all the water that's on the roof, it's all going to now leak out of the gutter and go right where you don't want it to, which is right next to the foundation. So you want your gutters cleaned. People should do that a couple times a year, and especially after the fall, of course, with all the foliage and everything else. But as those are cleaned out, then they go down into the ground, and then when they meet the ground, now it all disappears because it ties into a pipe that's under the ground. So a lot of times we'll look around and see if we see signs that the water is backing up out of that piping.
Pooling and depressions.
Yeah, a lot of times you'll see erosion around, like it washes all your mulch away and everything else, and that's a little bit of a dead giveaway, like, hey, first thing first, this appears to be clogged. Maybe you should have it either snaked out or run a new line and make sure that this roof water gets away from the house, because the roof water is just so much water. One thing that's a little bit frustrating, though, is you can go in and reroute all the downspout lines, but if the problem still exists, that if the ground gets wet, the water has found a pathway into the house.
Right.
So even if you reroute all the downspout lines, at certain times, the ground's still going to get wet. And then when the ground's wet, it's going to follow that same pathway it already made.
Right. Is our soil content a contributing factor?
Our soil for my family is good.
Okay.
Around just the type of clay soil we have, yes, it's not real good at draining. It exerts pressure on the walls. Right. It is a rough type of ground that we have around here, and it attributes to a lot of the problems we have.
Now, when you're looking at a home, do you look at a home to decide whether an exterior French drain will work or interior, or you prefer one over the other?
Well, mostly what we like to do is, actually when we meet the homeowners, is do a little bit of an interview to kind of find out how long they've been at the home and what their future plans are and what all they've been seeing. Because keep in mind, they may have been in the house for 20 years. we're there and we're just kind of trying to look around and we're trying to diagnose things as best you can where a majority of them are all hidden, or you're not there when it's leaking. So we try to gather as much information as we can, and we offer a whole variety of different types of solutions because we don't have one method that, oh, that's the good one, do that one all the time. We have to cater to the house and what people are going to be using that space for, and that determines like, well, hey, since you're not planning on going anywhere and you're going to put a nice game room in and you're going to have carpeting on the floor, I would suggest doing this, this, and this.
Well, can you explain to us a couple of those methods? And also for people who live in the city, you know, exterior French drains often are not an option because the houses are so close together.
And the exterior drainage, because sometimes we will get the question like, well, I want to do this right. Let's stop that water before it ever gets in the first place. And in theory, I really like that. So, yeah, we can come in and excavate out all the soil all the way down to the footing. Now, people, I think, sometimes are forgetting what type of mess this creates, because you have to remove sidewalks, bushes, air conditioning units, decks. All that stuff has to be removed. You dig all the way down to the bottom, and you put the new foundation coating on, you put your new footing drains in, put in as much stone as they're willing. The more stone, the better. Cover the stone with fabric, push ground back in. But one thing that's a little frustrating to us is it's a very expensive fix. We're going to make a big, huge mess. And warranty-wise, we cannot give any type of long-term warranty on an exterior drain. Yeah, and then you feel a little bit silly because you're like, well, this is the same drain system they already had. So we do exterior drains on occasion, but it's our least popular method.
Okay, and just for the record, Alltech has always said we prefer the water to be captured and turned away from the house before it goes into the house.
Yes.
But it's always not practical, and we do say that too. Sometimes it really is not practical, and it depends on the amount of water coming in. Now, you do interior French drains.
Yes.
And with or without sumps, or more drains, or and the kick plate they have along the bottom? Tell us a little bit about the interior French drains.
We have three main types of interior drains, but the whole idea of interior drains is we're not stopping the water. All we're doing is redirecting it to an area where it's not going to hurt anything, so that it doesn't structurally hurt the house or wear out the walls, and do it in a fashion in which we can do it one time. And with these type of methods, we can give lifetime warranties that whatever area we treated, they can't get water there anymore, because there's methods to keep it that we don't have to worry about mud clogging up the system or tree roots getting in it or anything else. So
now, this is on the interior side of the house wall.
Yes.
At the footing.
Yes, the most popular method, and I know it's hard because we do so many different types, but the most popular choice of folks is a system called WaterGuard. And a typical installation, we may cut out a section of the floor, maybe just 6 to 8 inches wide, right where the floor and the wall meet. Dig a trench under the floor, maybe just about 4 inches deep. And when it's concrete block, we drill holes in the bottom of the wall every 4 inches, because that's opening up all the hollow cores of the block. And we want those, we want the holes open so that when we do have a really bad rainstorm and the ground's totally saturated, and even though now the ground's sloped away and the gutters are clean and you got new downspout lines, still the ground gets wet sometimes. So the water might soak its way in the yard 20 feet away, and 3 feet below ground level, it's working its way over to your wall. So now when it comes in...
Tree roots have a lot to do with that too, don't they?
They will tend to follow some of those past, but the one thing about tree roots that's good, at least they'll soak up some of the water.
Some of it.
So they hurt us and help at the same time.
Sorry,
but when I know, and I get off topic easily, as you see. But as that water then gets in the wall, the whole idea is keep it inside the wall until it gets to the bottom. It drains out of the holes that we drilled, and we collect it in a pre-molded waterproofing pipe, which that's the WaterGuard, and then that WaterGuard system gets cemented right over. So like we talked about, it didn't stop the water. We're just controlling where it goes. So now we have it collected in that pipe, but we have to get it out of the house.
Right.
So 98% of the time, where that water goes to is a type of sump pump system. And the word sump pump, that sometimes scares people right off the bat. Because when they think of a sump pump, they think of the problems involved with them. Like, I heard sump pumps smell. I heard sump pumps back up if the power's out. So one thing that we've learned over 38 years is we've helped create a sump pump type of system that takes all the things away that people used to complain about.
Okay.
So really how ours works, it's a 2-foot deep tank buried under the floor.
Right.
All the water drains to the tank. When the water gets about halfway filled, there's a cast iron pump in there that the float hits the halfway point. The pump will run up for about 8 seconds, and we pump the water up and out of the house and take it somewhere where it's not going to want to recirculate right back in.
What happens if there's a power outage?
If there's a power outage, in the past, you cross your fingers and
Right.
hope that enough water doesn't come in to make it back up. But what's a much better solution these days, we have a battery backup system.
Oh,
So we
okay.
have a second motor that sits in the tank. Now that motor's hooked up to like a 120 amp dry cell battery. So if the first pump, if it would break, which it's mechanical, it will break someday.
Yeah, they were out.
Or that's what I'm always worried about, the power going out. Because your power goes out when,
There's storms, yeah.
it's the biggest storm ever. And
Yeah.
Hurricane Ivan, the power's out.
I was going to say Ivan. It's still
that's when you
fresh
need
in
your,
our memory.
I know, it's so long ago, but it seems like last year. So when the power does go out, it doesn't matter. There's a second pump in there that when the water hits a second level in the tank higher than it should, that pump kicks on and pumps it up and out. But it uses the energy in that dry cell battery. And we have the type of battery backups. We can pump out about 13,000 gallons of water
I was just
before
going
it's
to ask
out of
how
energy.
much can
I'm
you
trying to
handle?
beat you to the
Yeah.
punch all the time, Judy.
That's okay. but
Yes.
You got it. You know where
At
I'm
least we're
going.
on the same page. We think,
We are
think the same
absolutely-
way.
Well, it's a concern. Well, power goes out, the battery will kick in. How long will the battery last? I
Right.
mean, we've lost power for 2-3 days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, then we get the people that they're like, well, I have that and I have a battery backup, but what if both of them fail? It's like, well, actually, there's actually an alarm system too. So if both of those systems failed and the water even hit a next higher level, there's an alarm that's battery operated that would go off alerting you that, hey, both of your pumps aren't kicking on for some reason. And that's when you'd, give us a call. So when it comes to these pumps, people are always worried about all the stuff they had to do, and we pretty much say, don't touch it.
Mm-hmm.
If you ever hear an alarm go off, call us. Other than that, leave
Does
it
it
alone.
ever reach a point where there's a overflow baffle or something where it can start or they're too far into the ground and it really doesn't work?
It's very difficult to run an overflow just to daylight somewhere, because then again, you're coming in with backhoes, and then you run into situations too of you're limited as to where you're allowed to take the water,
yeah.
because then you're worried too, like, oh boy, I don't want it too close to my neighbor, or I don't want it to ice up the front sidewalks. So that's
It
a
would be
complication.
nice if all of our neighbors worried about whether or not their ground lines were too close to our house. That's not always
I've never
the
heard
case.
a customer, they say, yeah, just run it over. I don't care.
Well,
That's Judy down there.
you've never heard that.
Yeah,
well,
right.
Okay, well, I've seen it. The thing about the sump pumps now, we have the double backup, and we have the drain. How often do the sump pumps fail?
There's not a real high likelihood of them failing.
Okay.
I mean, they're going to fail. It's a mechanical part, the primary one. So we get a lot of folks like, I'm not worried about it, and they just do the primary pump. But we also have an alarm in there, and one day that alarm goes off. And I think it triggers a little bit of a thing like, oh boy, if I wasn't home, that could have backed up, and my game room could have gotten wet. So we have a lot of folks that we did their work 20 years ago, and they're calling now like, hey, why don't I add one of those
I was just
battery
going to
backups?
say, at some point there's having that double backup. I mean, especially if you're going to be finishing your game room, there's so much money
Right.
involved in that. If you have that extra protection, that
We even have another
makes
pump. They
sense.
call it a triple safe. There's 3 pumps in
Okay,
it.
that's overboard.
I know.
I'm just kidding.
Well,
I'm just kidding.
but that's why we have all those options, because each person wants their own level of protection.
Right.
You meet the person that they're looking at you like, Brian, well, really, I'm selling my house in 6 months. I just want it that I don't have water on the floor, but I don't want to get crazy on it. And you can respect that. You're like, well, yeah, if I was leaving, I wouldn't want to put any more money into it than I had to. So those people might want the minimum amount of protection. Somebody else, they're making, like a real nice game room, and they're like, I don't want any chances. Hey, for the little bit of extra investment to have the best pumping system, I want that one.
So what is the what's the outcome for people who know they have water and end up not getting this mitigation? I mean, talk a little bit about these walls.
Well, as far as the water seepage issues, it's a problem. It never goes away. If the water's already found a way in, it's not that all of a sudden like, oh, water is not going to travel that pathway anymore. It's a problem you will have to deal with eventually. They may not deal with it until now they're going to sell their home, and actually their agent is probably saying, you know, hey, you better address this before we put it on the market, because there's not a lot of people that want to buy a home with a known water seepage problem.
Well, and then the cracks. I mean, from that hydrostatic pressure
Yeah.
on the wall, you have the cracks. You get the vertical, you got the horizontal, you got the stair step, you got the bowing. I mean, is there when you look at a foundation wall and you see these problems, is there something that you go, okay, that little stair step crack, I can handle it. It's just a little shifting, a little settlement. Okay, that wall is now bowed. How much? That's a problem. Or a vertical crack at the frost line, or horizontal crack at the frost line, or something. What are we looking for?
What we're looking for, we get, and it's the same thing. We were talking a little bit about the water, where people's interpretation is different. They'll call us and be like, oh my goodness, wait, do you see these cracks in my walls? And they're in a panic. And we go out and look at it, and really, it's not that uncommon. We're trying to calm the people down. Like, this is not that bad.
Okay.
You know, it's like, don't. You know, now it may be something that they really should look at addressing, because really when it comes to cracks, because sometimes people call and say, oh, it's cracked, but it's not moving or it's not bowed. And it's like, well, if it's cracked, it's moved. So a lot of our evaluation is to go out, and whether we're using laser levels to see if there's settlement, so see if the house is sinking in any fashion, or just using 4-foot levels to see how far out of plumb the foundation walls are. And then we can investigate and kind of show the homeowner, you know, how far out it is, and then treat it accordingly.
Right. Now, just so everybody doesn't panic, there are some cracking that occurs from normal settlement that has absolutely nothing to do with water. And we're not talking about that type of cracking.
Yes, because sometimes we go out, and it's hard to tell over the phone which ones are serious and which ones aren't, but we go out there, you know, the house is 5 years old, there's these little cracks that have kind of opened up, and really those are more the type, a lot of times we'll look at them, we'll shoot it with the laser level, explain to them how far out of plumb it is. Now we have a benchmark, so they can keep an eye on it.
Right, that's
if it's
always a good
something
idea.
if it's something that continues to get worse, it should be addressed.
Right.
Now if it's something that, like, it's settled a certain amount and it hasn't changed, then it's like, there's really nothing that may need done.
Now, what happens when we go into that basement and we see that wall and it's got all the cracks running along the horizontal frost line, and then above it is pushed in?
Yeah,
and you see this a lot.
Yeah, the most common pattern, and what you're describing is what we'd say is a bowed wall or bulging wall, in which the wall is hinging, and you tend to get a horizontal crack at the mortar joint, usually about 2 feet lower than whatever the ground level is built on the other side. And then when it gets closer to the corner, it'll turn into like a stair step type pattern. So they almost all look the same, and people say, oh, have you seen one that looks like this? And it's like, well, we've probably looked at 10 of them today.
I was in a house down in West Elizabeth the other day, and no kidding, that the whole wall was like 4 inches off the bottom course.
Yes, yes,
I was like,
absolutely.
I don't want to be down in this basement anymore.
Yeah, I wish you could see all the ones that we fix, like how bad they actually
How do you
get.
fix them?
Because, well, we have 3 main methods we use to stabilize the bowing foundation walls. The one that's probably most popular and people see the most are the wall anchors.
Okay.
Another method is our power braces, which are like a steel I-beam in front of the wall, and then maybe newer to the market, and by newer I would say the last 13, 14 years, is like a carbon fiber fabric, or what is called, we call carbon armor, is the one that we choose to use. And which of these 3 methods, they each have their own particular place that they're ideal. So once again, even though anchors are most popular, that's not always the best solution. So we have to kind of work with the construction of the house and what the surroundings are.
Does a lot of it depend on how the house was built, what type of method you can use?
Very often,
Okay.
A situation you explained, like you get a little closer to the city and the homes are a little closer together. When we put a wall anchor in, to give a generic explanation of a wall anchor, for the foundation wall that's bowed, what we do is usually start about 2 or 3 foot off the corner, measure down on the wall, about 2 foot or so below ground level, drill a hole through the wall, and drive typically about 12 feet of a galvanized steel rod through the wall, under the ground, and ends up being about 12 feet away from the house. So then you go outside, cut off a section of grass, dig down and find that rod, and then there's a big 16 by 16 inch steel plate that buries in the ground attaching to that rod. And then you come back inside the basement, and there's another steel plate on the inside.
Right.
Now, the size of the steel plates on the inside, they vary in size from 11 by 18 inches to they can run the full height of the wall. Or we've had ones that we've cut channels and they have to be 18 feet tall because it's such a huge wall. But you put in the correct plate on the inside that meets the design criteria, and then tighten up the anchors. The plate that was buried in the ground, it will lock into the soil to a point where it can't be moved.
Now, I used to see where they had an auger that they used to use to crank them.
And actually, we used a machine with an auger very often, but actually we
Not
use
anymore?
it so very seldom, just for the reason that we run into too many rocks and roots.
yeah.
And I remember actually doing it and unscrewing the auger with a big giant pipe wrench out of the ground backwards.
I've seen them do that.
It is not fun by any means. So now it's actually gotten to the point that most of our foremen, they're like, I'm not even bothering with the machine, I'll just hand dig them.
Hand dig them. Okay.
Yeah. But then once that whole thing's in, you tighten everything up, and the plate, once it's seated in the ground and can't move, when you tighten on the plate on the inside, you're actually putting all the pressure, wanting to bring that wall back to where it used to be.
Right.
But we don't muscle up on these and make the wall straight all at once.
Right.
What it does, from the day they're in, there's a lifetime warranty. It can't bow any further. But if they get retightened maybe once a month, just in the summer months or when it's dry, you can actually start straightening the wall. And the reason for it is the clay soil around here. What pushes these walls in is all that ground around the house, that clay soil. When water gets in it, it soaks it up, and that clay expands. And that's what's putting that lateral pressure and push on the wall. That's the biggest force that pushes the walls in. But just as now we get to the fall, and as that ground dries out, that clay will tend to shrink. And by retightening, you're bringing it back to meet that dirt level. So there's always a different variance in how much each wall will come back. But the thing we know for sure is we can stabilize it so it can never get any worse.
Okay. And then I think real quick, if you could just give us a real brief overview on what the Kevlar strips are.
Yeah, the carbon armor, it's actually a very slick process. A lot of folks like it. That is maybe best suited for when you catch the wall in a more of an early stage, because that is used to hold the wall right where it is, stabilize it. So it doesn't try to straighten the wall, but how that is used is we actually, it's a funny word, but scarify the wall, where you get any paint or debris from the top of the wall all the way down the wall, and there's an 8-inch wide Kevlar woven material that you epoxy the wall, soak the Kevlar in the epoxy, attach it to the wall, it becomes part of the wall, and when that sets up and hardens up, the whole idea and the way that's engineered, that Kevlar material, you cannot stretch this material. So if the wall were to try to hinge like it does and push in, it's trying to stretch that material and it can't stretch it.
It's like putting a steel beam there.
Yes, but you're in contact with the whole entire thing, and you're
Exactly.
not putting the pressure into the floor joist system or the floor. It just strengthens itself up, and you just lay those out the way they're engineered, so many feet apart from one another. And then those, actually, if you paint the wall, it's like you'd have a heck of a time even knowing they're there, so it's kind of nice as far as it doesn't stand out.
Very good. You know we're out of time.
That,
We're out of time.
basements are so much fun to talk about. You know, we could just go on and on.
I'm going to tell you.
Are we
I'm
on
gonna-
question 4?
I think we're on question 4. I honest to God think we are. There's so much more that you should know about what to take. So much that goes wrong with your house starts in the basement. That's why it's really important that you keep your eye on your basement, that you take proper maintenance in your basement, and that you take whatever steps you can to make the repairs early, because it will cost you less and it will save your house and the look of your house in the long run. But I would like to thank you all for joining us at home in Bethel Park, and we will see you next time.